I got my father's land on a Tuesday. I remember that because I had taken the day off work. I'm a nurse, and swapping a Tuesday shift feels different from swapping a Friday. Like the whole rhythm of the week gets thrown off. I drove 40 minutes out to a law office in a strip mall in Greenville, signed things I barely understood, and walked out holding a manila folder with a deed inside it for 2.3 acres on the edge of Carteret County. I didn't even know my father owned land. That's the part I keep coming back to. My father, a quiet, careful man who worked 30 years in water treatment, who clipped coupons until the day he died, who drove the same Ford F-150 for 16 years, had bought 2 acres of land outside New Bern, North Carolina sometime in the early 2000s and never told a single person in our family. Not me, not my aunt, not his sister out in Fayetteville. Nobody. The attorney, a soft-spoken woman named Miss Ale, alderman whose office smelled like old paper and burnt coffee, handed me 2 envelopes with my name written on the front in my father's handwriting. I recognized it immediately. The way he made the capital J with a little curve at the bottom, the way the letters leaned slightly to the right, like they were all walking into a headwind. She told me the envelopes had been in her firm's files for 3 years, sealed and notarized. My father had left specific instructions. The first envelope I could open right there. The second one, she slid it across the desk with both hands almost ceremonially. I was not to open for 48 hours. She said it as plainly as if she were telling me to wait 2 hours before swimming after eating. 48 hours, Ms. Calloway. Your father was very specific about this. I almost laughed. Even in death, my father had a plan. I opened the first envelope in the car, sitting in the parking lot with the engine off. The letter was 3 paragraphs, handwritten on the same yellow legal pad he kept by the kitchen phone my whole childhood. Jess, he wrote, by the time you read this, I'll be gone, and I'll spare you the part where I tell you how proud I am of you, because you've heard it enough and you know it's true. The land is yours, free and clear, no mortgage, no lien. I've paid the property taxes through next year. The deed is in your name and your name alone. Tell your husband there's a boundary dispute with the neighboring property. Tell him it's tied up with the county and could take years to resolve. Tell him it may not be worth much until it's settled. I know this might feel strange. Trust me, baby girl. Wait 48 hours. Then read the second letter. You'll understand. Dad. I sat with that for a long time. The land my father left me, I found out later from a local real estate agent I called that afternoon just to have a number in my head, was worth somewhere between $180,000 and $220,000, depending on development potential. That part of Carteret County had been quietly appreciating for years. People from Raleigh and Charlotte were buying up rural parcels for weekend builds, small farms, off-grid setups. My father hadn't left me a modest inheritance. He'd left me real money, and he told me to lie about it. My husband, whose name is Troy, was home when I got back. He was on the couch watching TV, which was where he usually was when I got home from long days. We'd been married 4 years. I'd known him for 6. In the beginning, I thought his easiness was confidence, that comfortable way he had of taking up space in a room, never seeming to worry about much. I learned later that it wasn't confidence. It was just a very practiced version of not trying very hard. He asked how it went before I even put my bag down. I told him exactly what my father had instructed me to say. I told him there was a land dispute with the neighboring property, that the county had an open file on it, that the attorney said it could be tied up for years, and that in the meantime the land wasn't really sellable and maybe not worth much. Troy nodded slowly, the way he nodded at things that didn't interest him. He muted the TV. How big is it? 2.5 acres, I told him, give or take. And they can't sell it? Not while the dispute's open, I said. He unmuted the TV. That was it. That was the whole conversation. I watched his face do a quick, almost invisible calculation, weighed the value of asking more questions against the effort it would take, and then let it go. I went upstairs, put the manila folder in the back of my closet under a stack of old nursing school textbooks, and tried to sleep. I didn't sleep much. The next morning, Troy left early for what he said was a job site. He did residential contracting, or said he did. His business had been bleeding money for 2 years, and I was the one keeping us current on our mortgage. And I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee going cold and thought about my father. He was 63 when he died. Heart attack, sudden, the kind that doesn't give you time to say anything. I got the call from his neighbor on a Saturday morning in March. I drove the 4 hours to Greenville by myself because Troy said he couldn't leave. There was a walkthrough he couldn't reschedule, he said, a client he couldn't disappoint. I handled the funeral arrangements by myself. I went through my father's house by myself. I found his reading glasses folded on the nightstand next to a library book he hadn't finished, and I cried in that room for a long time before I packed anything. Troy came down for the funeral, stayed one night, left the next morning. I thought about all of that while my coffee went cold. My best friend Tamara called around 10 that morning. We'd been close since college. She was a social worker, sharp in the way that meant she noticed things other people missed. And she was one of those people who texted, "How are you actually doing?" instead of just, "How are you?" She knew about the attorney appointment. She'd been checking on me since my father died with a consistency that Troy had never managed. She asked how the meeting went. I told her the truth, all of it, the deed, the 2 envelopes, the instructions to wait 48 hours, everything. There was a pause. "Jess," she said, and something in her voice shifted. "Troy's brother called me yesterday." I set down my mug. His brother, I'll call him Warren, was the one person in Troy's family I actively disliked. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with a steady, low-frequency certainty, the way you dislike a noise that's always in the background. Warren was a real estate flipper, or tried to be. He always had a deal going, always had a pitch, and he had a way of hovering around any mention of money the way a housefly hovers around something sweet. Tamara told me that Warren had called her completely out of the blue, she said, which meant it wasn't out of the blue at all, and asked casually in the way people ask casually when they're trying hard not to seem like they're asking, whether she knew anything about what my father had left me, whether the property was valuable, whether it had come to me outright, or whether there were conditions. He asked me if you seemed excited or disappointed after the meeting, she said. I felt something settle in my chest. A kind of cold clarity, like the moment before you know something for certain. "What did you tell him?" "I told him I hadn't talked to you yet," she said. "Then I called you." I loved her for that. I told her so. We talked for an hour. She helped me think through what my father was doing, why the 48 hours, what he might have known about Troy and Warren and the rest of his family that he'd never said out loud. My father wasn't a suspicious man by nature, but he was an observant one. He'd watched Troy for 4 years. He'd been polite and civil the way a man is when he sees something he doesn't want to name but intends to account for. He had accounted for it. After I hung up with Tamara, I drove to the property. I hadn't done that yet, hadn't gone to actually look at it. It was about 90 minutes away, down past the county line onto a 2-lane road that cut through pine flats and open fields. I found the address from the deed, pulled off onto a gravel easement, and got out. It was beautiful in that simple, uncomplicated way that land can be beautiful. Mostly cleared, with a row of old-growth pines along the back edge. There was a creek along the southern border, maybe 10 feet across, running clear. The neighbor's fence, the one supposedly involved in the boundary dispute that didn't exist, was a modest white post and rail, neatly maintained, nowhere near where my father's survey markers were planted in the ground. There was no dispute. There never had been. I stood there for a while, just listening to the creek. A red-tailed hawk was doing slow circles above the tree line. I thought about my father standing here, paying cash for 2 acres, deciding to keep it quiet, deciding to wait and see who his son-in-law really was before he decided what to do about it. I drove home and made dinner and told Troy nothing new. He was on the phone when I came in. He moved to the other room when I started cooking, which he often did, and I heard the low murmur of his voice through the wall, but not the words. He came back when dinner was ready, ate, said it was good, Watched TV. I watched him the way my father had probably watched him. That night I slept better. I'm not sure why. Maybe because I finally understood that I wasn't waiting on something bad to happen. Something bad was already happening, and I was the one who knew it. That's a different feeling entirely. 48 hours after I'd opened the first envelope, I opened the second one. Troy had left for the morning. I sat at the kitchen table with the second letter, the same yellow legal pad paper, the same forward-leaning handwriting. "Jess," it began, "if you're reading this, it's been 2 days. I hope you noticed some things. 3 years ago, I hired a private investigator. I'm not going to apologize for that because I'm a father and you're my daughter and I saw things I couldn't prove. The PI confirmed them. I'm not going to list everything here because what matters is what I did about it. Everything that happened after you told Troy about the land dispute is documented. The PI's firm, their contact info is with Miss Alderman, placed a voice-activated recorder in your home before you got back from my office. They had a court order. It's legal. Everything recorded in a common area during those 48 hours is admissible. I also want you to know, the deed is structured so that any property received as a gift or inheritance during your marriage is separate property under North Carolina law. I had an attorney confirm this 3 years ago. Troy has no claim to the land regardless of what he does, but the recordings may show you other things you'll need to know when you decide what's next. The second thing in this envelope is a number for a family law attorney I've already paid a retainer to. She's expecting your call. I love you. I'm sorry I couldn't be there. Do what you need to do. Dad. I read it twice. Then I folded it very carefully and put it back in the envelope. I called the family law attorney that afternoon. Her name was Catherine Holt, and she had a direct, unhurried way of speaking that reminded me a little of my father. She confirmed everything, the recordings, the retainer, the documentation. She told me that what the recordings captured during those 48 hours was significant. Troy had called Warren within 2 hours of me telling him about the dispute. Warren had contacted a real estate attorney that same evening to ask about spousal claims to inherited property in North Carolina. My mother-in-law, Troy's mother, had called Troy the following morning, and the conversation had included a detailed discussion of whether Troy could get me to sign a quitclaim deed if he framed it as something routine, a formality, something the lender required for a refinancing we weren't even doing. They'd been moving fast. They'd also been completely wrong about what they were dealing with. Catherine told me to take a few days, not to change my behavior, not to let on anything had shifted. She said she'd prepare the filing and contact me when it was ready to move. I went back to work. I worked my shifts, came home, made dinner, watched Troy watch TV. He mentioned the land once more, offhand, casual, the same practiced casualness, asking whether I'd heard anything from the attorney about the dispute. I told him not yet. He nodded and went back to the game. I thought about my father a lot during those days. I thought about the version of him I'd always known, quiet, steady, a little hard to read, and this other version that had been running alongside it the whole time, the one who had hired a private investigator, the one who had paid a retainer to a family law attorney for a divorce his daughter didn't know she'd need yet. The one who had bought land and kept it secret for 15 years, waiting. He had loved me the way he did everything else, practically, patiently, and without making a noise about it. The divorce papers were filed on a Thursday morning, 3 weeks after I opened the second envelope. Catherine walked me through every piece of it beforehand, the recordings, the PI documentation, the deed in its ironclad separate property status, the financial record she'd subpoenaed, Troy's business accounts, which turned out to have been mingling client deposits with personal funds in ways that interested the state licensing board considerably more than they interested me. Troy was served at the job site. He called me 17 times that afternoon. I let them all go to voicemail and sat on my back porch with a glass of iced tea and listened to the creak sound that I'd imagined was somehow carrying all the way from Carteret County, even though it wasn't, obviously. But I needed something to listen to. His mother called Tamara, which I found out later. Tamara sent me a screenshot of the voicemail transcript in a single text that said, "Don't worry about it." I didn't. Warren showed up at my house that evening. I watched him through the front window, watched him ring the bell twice, stand on the porch looking at his phone, ring it once more. I didn't answer. After about 10 minutes, he left. That night, for the first time in a long time, I cooked the meal I actually wanted. Pasta with canned San Marzanos and a lot of garlic and a glass of red wine, and ate it alone at the kitchen table with the back door open so I could hear the actual birds in my actual yard. The land is mine. It's been mine since the moment my father signed the deed. No dispute, no condition, no loophole. The family law attorney confirmed what my father had already confirmed. In North Carolina, property inherited during marriage remains the separate property of the inheriting spouse. Troy couldn't touch it. He never could have. My father knew that. He just wanted 48 hours to let everyone else show him who they were. The divorce was finalized 7 months later. Troy didn't contest much once the financial documentation came to light. His contractor's license was already under review, and his attorney, I was told, advised him to keep the settlement quiet. Ms. Alderman called me the day after finalization. She said she had one more item from my father's file, a letter he'd left with no specific instructions about timing, just that it was meant for me after everything was settled. She mailed it to me. It arrived on a Saturday morning. "Hey, kid," it said, because that's how he always started letters. I'm guessing it worked out or you wouldn't be reading this. I know it was a strange way to handle things. I know I should have said more out loud when I had the time. I'm sorry about that. Some men find it easier to plan than to talk. The land is real. The value is real. Do something good with it. Build something or don't. Just don't let anybody tell you what it's worth. You were always the smartest person in any room you walked into. I hope you finally start acting like it. I love you, Jess. I always will. I folded that one up and kept it in the same drawer where I keep my nursing license and my passport and the things I don't want to lose. The land is still mine. I've been up there a few times now, just to walk it. There's a spot near the creek where the ground is level and the pines block the wind. I've been thinking about what to build there, nothing rushed. I'm in no hurry. My father raised me to be patient. I've thought a lot about what my father actually did. Not the logistics of it, the PI and the attorney and the recordings, but the deeper thing underneath all of it. He saw something I couldn't see yet. He watched Troy sit across from him at holidays and birthday dinners and said nothing, gave nothing away, and then went home and made plans. Careful, quiet, unglamorous plans. The kind that don't get remembered in stories the way dramatic confrontations do, but the kind that actually work. That's the part that stays with me. There's a version of this where my father pulls me aside one afternoon and says, "I don't trust him, Jess, I've seen things." And maybe I listen, or maybe I don't. I was 29 when we got married and I thought I knew. But even if I'd listened, what would that have given me? A suspicion. A feeling. Nothing I could hold in my hands when I needed it. Instead, he gave me a deed and 2 envelopes and 48 hours. He gave me the chance to see it for myself. That's the thing about intelligence that nobody talks about enough. It's not about being the loudest or the quickest or the one who wins every argument in the room. My father was none of those things. He was the guy who read the manual before he touched anything. The guy who checked the weather 3 days out before he made plans. He was patient in a way that looked like passivity until you realized he'd already thought 10 steps past wherever you were standing. And here's what I've come to understand. The people who tried to take from me did it because they assumed I wasn't paying attention. Troy's whole calculation, and Warren's and his mother's, was built on the premise that I was easy, that I was the kind of woman who'd sign whatever you put in front of her if you framed it right. They moved fast because they thought fast was enough. They never stopped to ask whether someone else had already moved faster. They hadn't earned anything. They just decided they wanted something and started working out how to take it. That's not the same thing. It never has been. I don't think Troy is a uniquely terrible person. I think he was someone who had learned that shortcuts worked and then ran into a situation where they didn't. The recordings caught him being exactly who he was. Not some hidden monster, just a man who thought no one was watching. That's the uncomfortable truth about character. It isn't what you do when people are looking. It's what you do in the 2 hours after you find out your wife might have inherited something valuable. Tamara was watching. My father had been watching for 3 years. And I, eventually, sitting at a kitchen table with cold coffee and a letter in my father's handwriting, I finally started watching too. I think about the land now when things get hard, not because of what it's worth, though I know what it's worth, but because of what it represents. Someone who loved me enough to plan for the worst and hope for the best and make sure I'd be okay either way. That kind of love doesn't announce itself. It just shows up, after everything, in a manila envelope with your name on it. I'm going to build something on that land. I don't know what yet, but I know it'll be mine.